Well, it really is quite difficult to follow that, but I'm going to try. I don't know if you remember where you were on the morning of the 9th of March 2022, but with my heart still tingling, I will forever recall where I was and what happened that day at Cambridge University Library. I'm going to tell you a story about one of the greatest challenges of my career and one of the biggest emotional roller coasters, which perhaps you can relate to as well, David and Andy, but also one of the most powerful professional lessons which I've learned and which I want to pass on. You may have heard about the mysterious disappearance and even more curious reappearance of two iconic Charles Darwin notebooks at Cambridge University Library. Now, this story has everything. It has intrigue, it has loss, and it has a very happy ending. Most importantly for us today, it also speaks to the collaboration and the value of collaboration between people united by the love of books, just as the ILAB motto has it, and just as what brings us all into the room today. Now, I want you to imagine me in April 2017. I'd recently been elected to my role, my absolute dream job, as the University Librarian for Cambridge. And frankly, between ourselves here, I was a bit daunted, holding this centuries-old post. Historic collections have been the absolute passion of my career. And I'd also lived near Cambridge as a young child, and there was a way in which returning to those flat and watery lands felt like a kind of personal return, and also a professional return to the material that had got me into the career I've had in the first place. And when you take on a senior role in an ancient institution like Cambridge, you know that there will be surprises. But when I was told very quietly in April 2017 by a senior member of library staff that two precious Darwin manuscript notebooks were missing, had been recorded missing in January 2001, believed to have disappeared in late 2000, I was frankly devastated. Now, the library is home to a vast Charles Darwin archive. Let's see. Here is the man himself. The Darwin archive has over 8,000 letters, field notebooks, experiment books, drafts of On the Origin of Species and the other books. All of them, if you like, sacred texts. And they are. That's what they mean to us. And for all who feel inspired by Darwin's work and also by the history of the life sciences and the way in which he has helped us to understand ourselves and our place in the natural world. Now, of all of Darwin's handwritten notebooks and sketches, there is one that you can just see peeking in the back behind Darwin here. There is one that has come to stand in the popular imagination for the theory of evolution, for, if you like, that moment of imagined discovery as we imagine it. And that is Darwin's 1837 sketch of the Tree of Life. Now, Darwin drew many trees, as his theories developed over decades, actually. But it is this sketch, the one we can see peeking out here. It's where he reflects to himself in his own writing, I think, and that moment when the tree comes out, that has been copied around the world. Tattoos, tea towels, tote bags, company logos. And as I was to learn that day in April 2017, the notebook containing this sketch was one of the two missing, Notebook B, one of two transmutation notebooks from 1837. That was not a good day. Having absorbed the shock, or some of the shock, what did I do? What did I learn? What did we do as an institution? The facts we've talked about in the public domain, and we don't know a great deal. The notebooks disappeared or were last known to have been handled in September to November 2000. I wasn't in Cambridge then, but we know extensive building work was underway. Perhaps that made the library more disrupted, less secure than it should be. And theft does not appear to have been considered as a cause of their disappearance at the time. Now, those of us in this room with the benefit of hindsight, that might be hard to understand, but you can only act in your time, under your own responsibility, and that's what I had to do. Today, our security policy and practice, there's a clear, swift chain of escalation which ends with the police. But at that time in 2001, the belief was that the notebooks had been misplaced, misshelved amidst our 200 kilometres odd of shelving, and that human error, and it happens, not criminal intent, was at work. And there had been many, many searches over the years. And with colleagues, I initiated a new round of searches too, including a forensic fingertip search through the Darwin archive itself, which is about 50 kilometres. Let's not rule anything out. Do everything to test whether that working assumption from 2 decades ago was right after all. But in parallel, I began to talk to trusted individuals, some of whom were in this room, to gain experience and insights and help. And from that beginning, from that point, I was sure that we had to move to a public position about these notebooks, and as openly as possible. But as Angus said, this had been a while. How do you move into that moment? I had to find a pathway to that point of public openness about what had happened that would maximise the chances of finding the notebooks intact. We did not want these to be destroyed. And we also need to do so in a way that evidenced the very, very real care and professionalism and commitment to which the library is today. We really are. Now, this process took time, but a strategy gradually formed. And that was thanks to many across the sector, from book trade colleagues to cultural theft and recovery experts to peers in other world-leading libraries. And I do want to give a special mention to Sophie Hayes from the Metropolitan Police, from the Art and Antiquities Specialist Crime Unit, superb. And also to William Brown, the former National Security Advisor at the Arts Council. There's many others. The examples of those others gave me hope and heart. Like learning from Bill Kelly over a very good lunch in New York, as he's the director of the New York Public Library, about an FBI raid that led to the recovery of a workbook by Benjamin Franklin back to the New York Public Library in 2015. These stories exist, these stories happen. And in 2019, I came to the very clear decision that it was time to move to a public appeal. And that was where the advice and experience of others in the field had led me strategically. And I also believed represented the very best tactical opportunity to get the notebooks back. But I guess one of the things we're talking about today is that going public is a very, very big deal. We are a really proud institution. We have a very long history. There's been a Library of the Scholars at Cambridge for over 600 years and an 800-year-old university. And we're really proud of Cambridge's scientific records. The library is home to the papers of Isaac Newton, of Charles Darwin, and today also the legendary cosmologist Stephen Hawking. And I also knew I'd have to be the face of the story. And I needed to find the voice and, yes, the courage to do it and to do it my way. Librarians, even chief librarians, we don't tend to come into the job with expectations of major media appearances. But we prepared for the appeal over many months. I'd like to thank my colleague, Dr. Mark Purcell, who's here today, Director of Research and Collections at the University Library, who went through this with me. We developed a media strategy. Cambridge is a celebrity university. You can't move without attracting media attention. And we knew this would be a major story and that it would travel around the world. We underwent Mark and I media training, and that was quite a scary experience. We developed our key messages, the facts, as much as we knew, how devastated we were, and we were. How much we needed the public's help and those professionals around us, all the ways in which we had changed to improve security over those 20 years, and how much we wanted those notebooks to come home. That has always been the goal. We reported the missing notebooks as a historic crime to the local police. That's what you have to do. We talked to colleagues in the book trade, and I thanks here to Joan Wintercorn, who many of you will know, and also to Angus O'Neill. We wanted to determine how best we could work with the trade, and the response was brilliant. A quote from Angus in our own press release and a statement on the ILAB's website. We also talked in person, and this was so important to all our key stakeholders, including our philanthropic and collection donors. We had a simple principle there, that no one close to us, our staff, our donors, our peer institutions, should be surprised by the news when it went live in the media. They should hear it from us first. And of course, there's a lot of practice for the coming media interviews. And I want to thank my dear husband, Simon Hall, who is here today. It's our wedding anniversary. What a great holiday he had. He's himself a former BBC journalist, and he put me through my paces as an interviewee at every opportunity for weeks at home. And that did make for some quite interesting domestic moments. And so the time came to launch our appeal, as this slide visualises, with an appeal line, the police details. And the alarm went off in our house about 5 a.m. on the 20th of November 2020 for a day of being interviewed on the world stage. I had my TV outfit ready. I walked to work with a flask of tea rather than being on my bicycle to steady my nerves. By 6 a.m, Radio 4's flagship news programme Today were headlining the public appeal, thanks to a superb set of pre-recorded interviews by BBC's Rebecca Jones with myself and Darwin scholar Professor Jim Secord. And with that, the embargo agreed with the Press Association was lifted. By 7 a.m, I was doing my first live radio interviews, and I'd like to say I could remember who that was, but I can't. It's just the days, radio, TV, newspapers, talk shows. You will know what this was like. The story went fast around the world and back again, with features in over 2,200 media outlets. And I think that speaks, doesn't it, to the significance of this object. 2 notebooks, but that Tree of Life sketch in Notebook B. And mostly the response was positive, or as positive as you could hope for, including the boisterous world of social media. And there's a bit of luck there, of course there is, but I have to say, and this is part of the message, is that outcome was not simply down to luck. It was hard work and a detailed plan and a strategy, including experts in cultural theft and recovery, communications and external relations. From that day on, many of the conversations I bumped into colleagues across Cambridge and further afield was, have you heard anything yet? Tips and speculation came in via the library's manuscript appeal email and direct to the police, and we passed everything that could be a lead of any sort straight to the police. And this went on for months and months, and kept us hoping. But the trail went cold eventually. And 12 months later, the local police, they effectively closed the file. There were no active leads. There was no hard evidence. And after all that work, and not a few sleepless nights, it was looking as if it might have come to nothing. Until we come to the 9th of March 2022. Now, on that morning, I was pretty much barricaded in my office, not to be disturbed. I was carrying out online interviews, we're still in COVID times, for a new appointment at the university library. And as the second interview ended, at about 10:45, there was a knock on my door. Dr. Kirsty Allen, the library's chief operating officer, put her head around the door, looking remarkably pale. And in her Glaswegian accent, which I won't try to reproduce, she said, I think you'd better come to see this. Now, when your COO interrupts you like this, you know it is not normally good news. But there in her office next to mine, on a table, was the now quite famous bright pink gift bag. And alongside it, a faded blue bespoke archive box, which is instantly recognised. I instantly recognised the type we kept our Darwin notebooks in. A tightly cling-filmed wrapped parcel through which you could see 2 aged brown leather scuffed notebooks and a large brown envelope. And there was this mysterious, now also famous typed message on that envelope. And I'm not sure if you can just see it, but just towards the bottom of the screen, it says, Librarian, that's me, Happy Easter. And a kiss. Well, what do you make of that? And all the while in the background, Kirsty whispered, they're back, they're back. I can tell you I was speechless, I was trembling, and there were tears. But all of it also mingled with caution, because of course we had to verify what we thought we were seeing. And while Kirsty discussed the next steps with the police, I had to go back into my office and interview more candidates online with a totally straight poker face. Now that was a performance, I can tell you. It took 5 long and agonising days, including a weekend, to receive police permission to unwrap the cling film package. Now, of unforgettable career moments, one of them was this one, standing in my office with 2 colleagues. On the left here, Jim Bloxham, former head of conservation, of the steadiest hands in the library. He unwrapped that little cling film notebook. And he set the notebooks on supports and then went through page by page with Dr. Katrina Dean on the right, our keeper of archives, doing an initial check against the published transcript and digitised microfilm which predated the disappearance of the notebooks and had all been published. Now, Jim was fastidious. He was turning page by page with me jumping up and down going, but what about page 36, Jim? Jim, what about the Tree of Life? Is it still there? And it is, and it was, and it is very, very special. Every page is present in those 2 notebooks. Nothing was lost, nothing damaged. That was Jim's assessment that the notebooks were stored in a dry place and very little handled. To be 100% certain, we went through further stages of verification, including academic review and also external review by antiquarian dealers Anke Timmerman and Mark James from Type and Form. My thanks to both of them. So, the notebooks were genuine, and they were back, which meant it was time for Media Part 2. And I can honestly tell you there is a very different feeling going out to tell the world that something of the Tree of Life's cultural significance is missing, to saying those notebooks are home where they should be, intact and safe, and we're going to put them on display so you can come and see them. The world shared our joy. The return of the notebooks was featured in over 4,600 media stories. Here's some of the headlines here. Double the original appeal. From the New York Times to the Sydney Morning Herald, from BBC's Radio 4 Today programme to, yes, that wonderful cartoon by Robert Thompson in Private Eye, and we did buy the original artwork from him for the archive. The pink bag and the curious message to the librarian were irresistible. But this also hit the headlines because we needed some good news and a sense of hope. And this was the time, which you'll all recall earlier this year, with the rise of the Omicron COVID variant and also the start of the Ukraine war. There was a thirst for something that would lift our hearts at that time. And the response was so warm right across the sector and from so many of you here. My favourite of responses, because surely this is what great libraries are for, was from a primary school in Bristol. So these were kids who were 10, maybe 11, with an amazing teacher. She wrote in on the day we went public in the media with all of their questions. Who did it? What happened? Are you going to prosecute? And they asked for a Zoom call so we could talk it through. And we did a few weeks later. Everyone has a theory. Cult film time travelers Bill and Ted stole the notebooks to do their homework, said one social media commentator, and they got lost in time. Another, one of my favourites, talked of a conspiracy of Finches. Very clever. So moving to the end of this extraordinary story, what do I think happened? We don't know a lot. This story in many ways is not ended. But I'd like to think that our actions pricked a conscience. This was not a heist. I think whoever was holding them could see we cared. We wanted them back. We wanted them back so much we went public and took the eyes of the world upon us. And we believed, and we took the message very clearly, that they belonged to the nation. They were there in the library for scholarship and for learning. And critically, without that public appeal and the help of everyone here, I do not think they would have been returned. And now, they're happily back, and they're wonderfully on display at the University Library in Cambridge at the moment, in very high security conditions, I should emphasise. We worked with a security consultant while we were doing this exhibition. And in conclusion, what have we learned from this? What do we take away? How can what we went through and the story of the Romanian heist, how can they help to guide future actions for others, perhaps similar cases? And what were the ingredients of success? For me, they're threefold. The first is that leadership that values honesty, openness and transparency is essential. And my actions were backed straight down the line from the Vice-Chancellor of Cambridge. Openness doesn't guarantee success, but if people don't know there's a problem, how can they help to solve it? Secondly, with that in mind, my second observation is this is an amazing community. And the collaboration across communities like ours, working together, library, book trade, collectors, academics, security experts, law enforcement, we made this happen by collaborating in pursuit of a single vision. Those notebooks needed to be found. And I want to thank all of you who played a part in that. Thirdly, if everyone in this room is united by a love of rare books and manuscripts, and I think we probably are, and that's a passion, it turns out, that's shared really widely around the world. So many around the world care about what we do, and they've got a huge investment in it. And that sense of value and trust, I think, is so important. It should inspire our best practice and our best selves. So together, we planned, prepared, and achieved this wonderfully happy ending. The Tree of Life is home, with the notebooks and the iconic Tree of Life back exactly where it belongs in Cambridge, where Darwin studied, at the University Library. It's our wonderful scientific past, back with us for the present, and preserved for the future. Thank you.